When you hear the word Bhutan, what comes to mind? For a lot of people, it's images of a mythical kingdom, right? A kind of hidden paradise tucked away in the Himalayas. But is this remote nation really the last Shangri-La on Earth? Well, in this explainer, we're going to peel back those layers of myth to get at the complex, fascinating reality of this kingdom. Okay, let's get into it.
This is the question that basically put Bhutan on the world map. For years, their official policy was to measure progress not on cold, hard cash, but in the well-being of their people. It's a pretty radical idea, and it totally captured the world's imagination. But as you're about to see, the real story is, well, it's a whole lot more complicated.
So to really understand Bhutan, we've got to start by calling it by its real name, Druk Yul. It translates to the land of the thunder dragon, which is just an awesome name, and it's rooted in their school of Tibetan Buddhism. It immediately hints at a culture that's way deeper and more complex than some simple paradise label can capture.
And that culture is absolutely shaped by Vajrayana Buddhism. We're talking nearly 3/4 of the population. And this isn't just a religion. It's the bedrock of everything. The nation's laws, its art, its social fabric, its whole identity.
So how did this one-of-a-kind identity even come to be? Well, you really have to look at two main forces that forged it. Its incredible, almost unbelievable geography, and its very unique history.
Let's just start with this number and try to wrap your head around it. 98.8%. That's the percentage of Bhutan's land that's covered by mountains.
Yep, that makes it officially the most mountainous country on the planet. And for centuries, you can imagine those towering peaks were like a natural fortress, just isolating Bhutan from the rest of the world. And that isolation allowed it to develop and preserve a culture that's really unlike any other.
And its political journey is just as distinct. You go back to the 1600s, a Tibetan Lama unifies all these warring valleys. Then in 1907, the current Wangchuck dynasty is established as the monarchy. A huge moment in 1949, they sign a friendship treaty with their giant neighbor, India. And then, and this is wild, the monarchy itself pushed for democracy, and Bhutan held its first democratic elections in 2008.
Now here's what's so critical to understand about this history, and it's a huge deal. Unlike pretty much all of its neighbors, Bhutan was never colonized. Through some very smart diplomacy and, of course, that killer geography, it kept its independence. That's a super rare achievement that just profoundly shaped the national psyche.
Being independent for so long allowed Bhutan to forge its own path, and that path led to its most famous idea, the one you've almost certainly heard of, gross national happiness.
So while most of the world is, let's be honest, still obsessed with gross domestic product, or GDP, Bhutan basically said, hang on, what if we're measuring the wrong thing? GNH is this whole philosophy that says true development has to balance material and spiritual well-being. It was a really beautiful and inspiring vision for a different way to run a country.
Which makes this next part so shocking. In 2022, the government just quietly dissolved the Gross National Happiness Commission. The entire policy framework that made Bhutan famous was officially abandoned. That kind of pivot signals that a massive shift is happening.
And that shift starts to reveal some pretty deep cracks in that Shangri-La myth. The story of modern Bhutan isn't just about happiness, it's also about some really difficult, long-standing challenges.
Take, for example, a policy from the late 1980s called One Nation, One People. On paper, the goal was a unified national culture. But for the Lachchampa, who are a Nepali-speaking minority in the south, the result was absolutely devastating. I mean, you can see the contrast right here. The Nepali language was banned in schools, thousands of people lost their citizenship, and ultimately, more than 100,000 people, that's nearly a sixth of the entire population at the time, were forcefully kicked out of the country.
And the challenges aren't just in the past. Today, more than 6% of Bhutan's entire population has left the country just since the pandemic. That's over 50,000 people, most of them young and educated, heading for places like Australia looking for better jobs. It's a huge brain drain, and it really makes you question that whole happy kingdom idea.
So facing all these challenges, Bhutan is now making a massive bet on the 21st century. And it's a bet that is just full of these fascinating, powerful paradoxes.
First, there's the good stuff. Bhutan's constitution actually requires that at least 60% of the country stays covered in forest. And the results? It's the only carbon-negative country in the world. It absorbs way more CO2 than it produces. It's an absolutely incredible achievement for the environment.
But now, look at this number, $539 million.
For a small economy, that is a massive investment. So, where did all that money go? Into an industry that seems to completely contradict everything about being green.
That's right. The government of Bhutan has become one of the world's biggest state-backed Bitcoin miners. They're using their cheap, clean hydropower to run these enormous energy-guzzling server farms. A carbon-negative kingdom is betting its future on crypto. And that right there just perfectly captures the paradox at the heart of modern Bhutan.
And the vision gets even bolder. The king has announced plans for a mindfulness city in a place called Jellafu. Think of it as a huge special economic zone modeled on places like Singapore or Dubai. We're talking a new international airport, rail links to India, even its own gold-backed currency. And get this, its governing board is going to be made up almost entirely of non-Bhutanese experts. It's a vision for a hyper-modern, globalized economic hub.
So here's the bottom line. Bhutan is at a crossroads. It's a nation trying to be the world's only carbon-negative country, while also being a state-sponsored crypto miner. It's moving from a unique philosophy of happiness to an economic model based on Singapore. It's a kingdom of incredible tradition, now betting everything on a completely globalized future. Which leaves all of us with the ultimate question. Can the idea of Shangri-La, even if it was always just a myth, actually survive the pressures of the 21st century?